Hello, everybody. How are you doing? How was your last week? I hope you all are well. We are going to read the chapter 24 of the 2nd Samuel today. Well, so it's the 59th class of the former prophets. Well, I want to say something about the title of this Bible study video. I heard some stories about the name of the Bible study last week. And then some person told me that, hey Sam, I don't understand what the popping Bible means. So, well, I was deeply thinking about the title uh, again, and finally I decided to rename it. So it should be called like Sam's Bible Study simply, right? Sam is my English name, so after my English name, I decided to call it Sam's Bible Study. That's easy and very comfortable. I think the content is more important than the name. So, well, if it is possible, uh, I want to stop talking about the names here. So I hope you all like the title Sam's Bible Study. But however, the door is still open. So if you have any kind of brilliant ideas and good ideas, then tell me, right? And I'm going to consider it. Okay, before getting into the body, I need to explain why I skipped chapters 22 and 23 and deal with chapter 24. The first reason is that 2 Samuel chapter 22 and Psalm 18 have the same content. Have you ever read two Bible passages together and compared them? They are the same, surprisingly. However, there is a little bit difference between them. Psalm 18 says in the title, so to speak, it's a superscription, right? Anyway, Psalm 18 says in the title that it is a song that was sung when he was rescued from Saul's hand. I'm not going to cover it. I'm going to cover that story here because it happened in the past time and we already read it. So I don't need to deal with that here again. However, I want to make clear which one was written first, Psalm 18 or 2nd Psalm chapter 22. I would say that Psalm 18 was written first because the title of Psalm 18 refers to the time of Saul. Well, that is why. Anyway, I can say that 2nd Samuel chapter 22 shows the end of David's era. Characteristics of the chapter are gratitude and confession of faith for salvation. So when he looked back his life, then he thought, oh, it was really grateful. It has been really grateful. That's what he thought, I think. I'm sure that those who are grateful while looking back on their lives are really happy. Then secondly, I need to talk about skipping the chapter 23. I understand it deserved to be called David's will. I mean, it's just the last word of his life, at the last time of his life, right? So chapter 23 mentions what we have been through so far and the 37 people who helped David involved in it. A person who has 37 people, 37 important people in his life, wow, that's really great. People who helped him, and the number of people who helped him was 37. That is really great. He is a rich man in real. I envy this the most. Anyway, I don't think there's anything important to deal with in chapter 23. So that is why I will skip chapter 22 and 23 and deal with chapter 24. It is chapter 24 is the last chapter of 2nd Samuel. So we are going to Kings, first chapter of Kings next week. Okay, then let's talk about the 2nd Samuel chapter 24. Let's say the content of chapter 24 first. When we read chapter 24, we found out that David did the census. censuses of ancient Israel had two factors. First of all, people of Israel need an army to fight a war, right? Everybody does actually. So as a premise of war, generally they took a census. Second, they believed that the war depended on God. So they had to ask before the census. However, David did not ask God for a census. So Joab really didn't like it and objected it for the first time, but eventually carried out the survey. Well, because that was his duty anyway. He was a man. He was a man who helped King David, right? That is why. So anyway, the census took 9 months and 20 days to survey, according to the verse 8. So we need to see the result. First, northern Israel had 800,000 soldiers. That's so many, right? And the Judah had 500,000 soldiers. Wow. Those numbers are really great. King David and the people found out that they had a large army. So the census was done. It looked like work was done there. But the strange thing happened to David. King David blamed himself to do this in verse 10. He commanded to do the census, and he blamed himself about it. That's so weird, right? But we gotta know that the real story has started from that time. God revealed his thinking to David and the people of Israel. So the prophet God, G-A-D, God. Some people just read his name like Gad, but I prefer just God to read it as God. Anyway, the prophet God came to David and spoke of 3 punishments because of the census, because God was not pleased with doing census without asking him. The matter not asking remained still, and it has to be solved. So I will tell you the 3 punishments that the prophet God suggested. First of all, 7 years of famine. And the second, David would be driven by his enemies for 3 months. Third, contagious disease among the people for 3 days. So David chose the third one because he might think the third one was the surest. However, surprisingly, 70,000 people died from Dan to Beersheba. I would say it was really very shocking to King David. David was a king of Israel, right? So he had to do whatever it took to stop the disaster at the moment. So he built an altar at the threshing floor of Aruna. Well, threshing floor, it's Goren in Hebrew. Goren, right? G-O-R-E-N, Goren. In the ancient time, the threshing floor was considered as a holy place. So it was like a very important place to connect with God. Anyway, who was Runa? We don't know exactly who he was. But however, many scholars say that he was a Jebusite king of Jerusalem. He might be one of the Hittites, but who knows? Anyway, I need to say another thing here. Actually, we don't know about Aruna, but we got another name of Aruna here. According to the First Chronicles, Aruna appeared in the different name Ornan, O-R-N-A-N, right? So these 2 different names refer to the same person. That's the conclusion that I got. There were no vowels in the ancient Hebrew, but only consonants. So the 2 names have the same consonants. So there is no problem, even if we consider that they are the same person. Anyhow, punishment ended by offering a sacrifice that was done by David. The very interesting is that according to the tradition of Judaism, Mount Moriah is the same place that is called Aruna's threshing floor, and it's going to be a Mount Zion, right? The site of the temple in Jerusalem. If someone asks me if this is really true, then I would say yes. Yeah, many people thought that way. And actually, here at this moment, we have to ask a question about the passage. Why was David crazed for a moment to do a census? He was out of mind? Or how should we understand Satan's upheaval and temptation to King David? I can see this as David being confused or out of his mind. It must be understood that it is because of the Satan's poking and temptation. This interpretation is possible because Satan can never go beyond God's permission, right? Especially in the Old Testament. Then why did God allow Satan to stir up David? We must understand that there was a hidden unknown sin of Israel in the text. And this punishment as God's discipline towards Israel was because of the unknown reasons. What Israel did wrong does not appear in the main text, but they had to be responsible for the sin. Actually, Dr. Hyuk-Kwan Kwon, he wrote a book, and the name of title in English is "Read the History Book Correctly." I think I need to show it to you here. In Korean language, 역사서 정확히 읽기 or something like that. Well, anyway, so if you will understand the meaning of this book, so it's written in Korean language, so I'm not sure that you could read it. Anyway, according to his book, as a matter of fact, God doesn't do anything without reason. In the end, the fact that 70,000 people died tell us that they did something big wrong in front of God. Of course, David had a responsibility as a leader. God also held David to the same level of responsibility. We got to know that the responsibility of a leader is very important. Anyway, I don't want to talk about it anymore. Now we have something to think about from the chapter. First, two things actually. First one, acknowledge God's sovereignty over the world and my life. It's a world and my life, right? We need to acknowledge God's sovereignty over the world and my life, our lives. What the text mainly says is God's sovereignty. I talked to the many people once in my sermon. The main politics of constitutional monarchy is the king exists but does not rule. I think it's familiar with you. So let's apply this to our life of faith. We know God exists. We know He exists. We know He lives. But if His ruling is not happening in our lives, then God has nothing to do with us. God may be a king, but He does not rule in our lives. Oh my God, that's a problem, right? So acknowledging God as a real being means that He really rules my life. Let us accept His ruling into our lives. Second, God wants to give us the blessing, but punishes the unrepentant. David was really sad looking at Israel. Living as God's people presupposes two choices. First one, if you live according to God's will, you will be blessed. Second one, if you do not live according to God's will, you will face a hardship. Right? Israel was punished for sins not revealed in the text. So I think that it is right to ask God to forgive our sins even when we do not remember, even we don't know. Why do we have to do this? To live according to God's will. Believing in God is 100 times better than not believing. But in order to really believe, we must believe properly. We must live according to God's will. Okay? So up here, I'm going to wrap it up here and see you next week. Thank you for listening me very carefully. Right? Okay. So if you have any question, then just you can text me. Right? Okay. Thank you. Bye-bye.